Welcome to the 5am podcast, where we bring you insightful conversations with thought leaders and influencers who are making headway and definitely some waves in their callings. Today, we are thrilled to have with us Paul Trammell, a man who has redefined what it means to chase dreams and live life on your own terms. From pursuing rock stardom for 2 decades to embracing sobriety and sailing the open seas, Paul's journey is a testament to the power of reinvention. Now, he's not just an author of 10 books, including Amazon bestsellers, but a living example of how radical change can lead to profound fulfillment. Join us as we dive into Paul's world of writing, sailing, sobriety, and the art of designing an ideal life. Get ready for an inspiring conversation that might just change the course of your own journey. Now, before we roll that intro, if you could be so kind as to share this with your friends and networks, I know many are going to enjoy this great conversation. Now, there's 2 other things. If you could be so kind as to give a 5-star review to 5am Podcast on your favorite podcast player, we would appreciate that. And I need to thank those who have ventured over to buymeacoffee.com/5am Podcast and bought us a few virtual cups of coffee this week and last. We do appreciate your support. Now, let's roll that intro. Paul Trammell, welcome to the 5am Podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me on.
Oh man, it's great to have you here. Anytime I get to think of the sun and the ocean waves and the smell and aroma of that salty air, I am in like Flynn, my friend. So,
Yeah, me too.
yeah, have you always been into sailing?
No, not always. I was introduced to it very young. So my father was a bit of a sailor,
Okay.
and I have a very early memory of being out on a boat. I think we were going to the Bahamas, but we were out
Wow.
where I couldn't see land anymore. And I remember it was the first time that I couldn't see land, and I just thought, this is amazing. This is wonderful. I love this.
Yeah.
And that never left me. And then much later in life, I got back into. I kind of had a realization that sailing is what I needed to be doing. I
Yeah.
had kind of a light bulb moment, and I started reading books about it, and I discovered that I had never heard the term solo sailing or single-handed
Okay.
sailing, and I
Yeah.
realized, wow, you can sail offshore all by yourself. That
Yeah.
sounds like I would love that. And anyway, I took a class. I just the ball just started rolling. I took a
Yes.
1-week sailing class, and later that year I bought my first sailboat, and
Nice.
a few years later sold everything and bought this boat and took off.
Yeah,
Haven't been back.
it's a bug that definitely bites people. Some harder than others, maybe, but probably one of I'd say the first time that I went sailing, it was actually an assignment that I was given to produce this pack story for the newscast, and we got on that boat and we were sailing, and it was so quiet, just the wind, no motor. I mean, my camera hitting the record button was probably louder than this just environment. And so the lady from the sailing club and we were just out there, and I was in awe. I was like, I'm close to the water, like in my canoe, and I'm not paddling, and the wind is doing all the work for me.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about what did sailing do to your mindset?
Well, gosh, what did it do to my mindset? You know, it teaches you a whole lot of lessons, obviously,
Yeah.
about just taking care of business, dealing with things that need to be done.
Yeah.
But it also is such a great accomplishment when you get out on the water. I mean, and for me, it's by myself, so I'm the only one on the boat. When you get out and you plan a journey, you know, a multi-day passage somewhere like from Florida to the Bahamas or
Yeah.
Florida to Maine or anywhere, Bahamas to Panama, you get out and you do it and you pull it off and you arrive. You just feel like you've accomplished something so big
Yeah.
and so amazing that one of the things it did for me is for finally, I didn't feel like I had to prove anything to anyone ever again. And that
Wow.
gave me a sort of a freedom I'd never experienced before. I finally had done something that I felt that I guess made me feel like it gave me such confidence in
Yeah.
myself that I haven't felt self-conscious or belittled, or I
Right.
don't feel like anybody can take anything away from me.
Yeah.
It's not an arrogant feeling. It's just a calm feeling of confidence, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't feel like all my life I felt like I had to prove myself one way or another. I got to be the best at
Mhm.
this or faster at that, or I got to prove to my father that I'm this or that.
Uh-huh.
Not consciously. It's just something
Yeah,
you
right.
realize when it all comes to an end. And I
Mhm.
think it all came to an end sailing, and then I realized that I'm like, wow, yeah, I don't have to prove anything to anyone. I feel good about myself. I'm
Yeah.
doing what I need to be doing. And I also feel
Yeah.
like I'm in the place I was meant to be. I'm living the life I was meant to
Mhm.
live. It's much more calm and peaceful, and I'm getting done exactly what I want to get done, and I'm living the life I want to live. And I don't feel like I have to run out and go somewhere else or escape.
Mhm.
There's no more escapism
Yeah.
because I'm
Right.
here.
You're in the adventure.
I'm in the
I
adventure.
was I took my road bike out to ride against the wind for a little bit. We're close to the Rocky Mountains and we've got a great west wind coming at us. And I was thinking about this conversation that we were going to be had. I was like, I wonder if I should tack down the road, do a little zigzag as I'm going along. But can you talk about how that's one of those things in sailing that you have a tool or a technique for any circumstance?
Yeah, yeah. The sailboats are amazing things, and often I just look. I'm sailing, and there's no motor running, and I
Yeah.
just look at the sails, and it's like magic. You're moving forward. You're very often sailing upwind, never directly into the wind,
Right.
but upwind. And it's hard to imagine how that works. But
Yes.
sailboats can sail. I can sail maybe 55 degrees to the true wind. More modern boats can do better than that.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can go upwind and then you can tack and go the other way and zigzag
Yeah. Right.
upwind and get there eventually. And of
Yeah.
course, we've all got diesel motors too, so
Right.
they're not
Of course.
super powerful. You can't just power into a 25 knot wind, but if there's no wind,
Hmm.
you can go.
Yeah.
But it's a go anywhere vessel. If you have the time, you can sail anywhere in the world without
Yeah.
starting the motor.
That's
If you're
right.
patient.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's no stopping you when you have that freedom. Maybe it's like for children once they get to ride a bike, then all of
Mm,
a sudden, wow, I've got some freedom.
right.
And then you get into the car and you forget that bike, man. I've got a vehicle now. I can go anywhere and
Yeah.
crash it and do whatever it is that young people do with their cars. But then you find out about boats and you're like, wow, Jesus
Hmm.
may have walked on water. I'm not better than him, but look at this. I can sail this boat anywhere in the world
Yeah.
where there's water.
Yeah. And your house is coming right along with you, if you live
Yeah.
aboard.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you about the trip to Newfoundland. You wrote a book about that, didn't you?
I did. Yeah. What a great adventure. Biggest adventure of my life.
Wow.
Yeah.
And yeah, what did it teach you, or what can you tell us of those golden nuggets that you got out of that trip?
Well, first off, it was my big bucket list
Okay.
destination. It's it's one of the main things I wanted to do on a boat. It's one of the reasons I bought this particular boat. This is a blue water offshore boat, made for going anywhere in rough conditions. And
Uh-huh.
when I first got into sailing, I had sort of a long thought of like where do I really want to go? What do I want to get out of this? Well, I want to go to places that are raw, wild nature. Just raw nature,
Mm-hmm.
where you can sail up
Yeah.
to an island. And I'd been to the Bahamas, and the Bahamas is like that. There's plenty of uninhabited islands with nice anchorages, and you're in nature.
Yeah.
But I was looking like, okay, where else is like that? Well, nowhere else in the Caribbean has uninhabited islands.
Right.
Literally, there's people living on all of them, and most of the rest of the Caribbean is populated and crowded. So then I start looking up the coast of the United States, and it's all there's. You look on Google Earth. This is what I'm doing. I'm looking on
Yeah.
Google Earth. There's houses and roads everywhere.
Yeah.
Everywhere, all the way up the U.S. East Coast. You get up into Maine. There's houses on every island. There's roads. There's cars. So I'm going further north. Nova Scotia comes next. There's a few places in Nova Scotia where you can anchor without seeing a house. So I'm like, okay, this is getting closer. But I'm like, gosh, there's houses like and roads everywhere. It's bizarre.
Yeah.
It's not what I expected. And I head further north, and I'm like, well, what's this place? Newfoundland. I've heard of that. I never don't know anything about it, but I've heard the name, and it's this
Yeah.
big island. And I go right to the center of the south coast, And I'm like, what is this? It's like here's these brown streaks. I zoom in, it's rock, and I'm like, wow, these are fjords, and this is rock, and I get, oh, these are cliffs. These are like big cliffs and long fjord, and there's no houses and there's no roads, and you scroll north 10 miles, 20 miles, 30 miles, 40, 50, still no roads, no
Yeah.
houses, and you go back and forth 20 or 30 miles, and left and east and west. It's just wilderness. And I thought, wow,
Right.
this is amazing. I got to see this place. So I
Yeah, you
started
do.
researching it, and there is very little written about sailing in Newfoundland. I might have written. I certainly
Wow.
wrote one of the first books about sailing
Okay.
there. There is a cruising guide, but there's not much. There's not much about it.
Mm.
But I have a sailing podcast, so I
Yeah.
interviewed some people that had been there, and I got what information I could, and I figured I learned that July and August is the time to be there. June is too early, and
Yeah.
September is too late. You got to get out before September. So I learned that, and I just studied the Google Earth, and I studied the cruising guide, and found some places I wanted to go. It's basically right in the center of the South Coast. There's a bunch of fjords.
Wow.
And finally, well, I wanted to go in 2020, but the pandemic, Canada
Mm-hmm.
closed its
Yep.
borders like most countries did. So I
Yep.
couldn't go in 2020. And I was finally able to go in 2022.
Mm.
And I sailed from Florida to Maine and kicked around Maine a little bit in late May and early June. And then I went to Nova Scotia, Lunenburg, and
Yeah.
sort of day sailed up Nova Scotia until late June. And I think I
Right.
arrived in Newfoundland June 3rd,
Wow.
a little bit early, but what an amazing! It just blew me away. I was
Yeah.
wondering the whole time, like, I hope this is really worth it.
Right.
I hope I didn't like build this place up in my head so much that it's going to let me down. Am I really going to see
Mm-hmm.
big fjords? Am I really going to see waterfalls coming down the fjords? Is
Yeah.
it going to be? What if it's not as fun as I hope? Oh my God, it exceeded all my expectations. There
I
were
bet.
waterfalls galore dropping down off 1,000-foot cliffs. There's
Wow.
there's cliffs everywhere. There's bright green valleys that are, that were scraped out by glaciers. The whole
Yeah.
place was created by glaciers. Just everything is just unbelievably amazing.
Right.
Nature, so deep and so raw. And there's I didn't there were I think the whole time I was there in 2 months, I saw like 8 other cruising
Wow.
boats. I
Is that
saw some
right?
local fishermen every now and then,
Okay. Yeah.
but most of the time in the fjords, I wouldn't see anybody.
Wow.
And I went hiking all the time. I climbed up these very steep walls of the fjords and got up to the top. And then up top is this. You feel like you're on the moon up there. You're way above the tree
Wow.
line. I mean, there's only the only
Yeah.
trees where I was in that area were right at the base of the cliffs, and you scramble up through rock and weird turf and moss and
Wow.
pitcher plant, carnivorous plants,
Right.
pitcher plants, and
Yep.
you get up to the top, and it's just rock and ponds and lakes and mountains. It's weird. It's like
Amazing.
something I've never seen. And there were
Yeah.
some places had big round, spherical boulders like
Really.
balls. Yeah,
Wow.
just sitting on top of the mountain. Just sitting on top of the mountain. Yet they were
Wow.
deposited by glaciers, I guess. But you can imagine, like, there's giant mountain trolls that live here, and they put these
Yes.
balls here on top.
That
They
is it.
put these rocks.
Love it.
What are they? I don't know what they're doing with them, but there's something. It's easy to imagine things like that.
I'm pretty sure there's some gnomes there too,
I
just rooting around
definitely,
doing their thing.
I definitely saw some footprints that could have been a yeti. I was staring at them for a long time, like I don't know
Oh,
what
that's
made these footprints, but it wasn't a person, and it wasn't a moose, and it wasn't a bear.
yeah, nice. Well, when you get off the beaten path, there is just something to see. And it's one thing to be on land to look out at the ocean. And man, I'd love to be out there. I can feel the spray in my face just as we're talking about this and the coolness and the humidity. But when you get to be on the boat and you're looking at land or you haven't seen land and then you do see land, I mean there's just something about that new perception that you have.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the other things I got to mention about Newfoundland, Canada in general, was the people. The people there are so friendly and so helpful. It just blows me away. Like for instance, one time I was hitchhiking. I needed to get to a particular gas station to buy a fishing license of all things,
Okay, yeah.
and I had a gas can with me to get some fuel. for my dinghy. I didn't realize, but I started hitchhiking at like the last town on the road. There's no traffic. There's no cars going by. And I'm walking for like, I don't know, 45 minutes. And the very first car that comes by stops and picks me up. And,
Mm.
uh, and the guy, I thanked the guy for coming to get me. And he says, yeah, because I guess you walked past my house and my son told me that you were walking by and were carrying a gas can. So I figured I'd come out and give you a
Wow.
ride. The guy got in his car and came and found me and made a special trip just to pick me up and take me wherever I
Wow.
needed to go.
Yeah, that sounds like those Maritimers, that's for sure.
Yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
another guy, I anchored in, I think it was in Bergio, a little town, and the guy comes out in his kayak and he says, introduces himself and points to his house and he says, I've got a little bed and breakfast over there and there's a dock you can use if you want to go into town, and and my pickup truck's there and you can use my truck if you need to go to the store, whatever.
That's
A stranger comes
awesome.
out and offers
Yeah.
to let me use his truck. Like that's never happened. That's never happened to me.
Yeah, that's the charm of the East Coast, that's for sure. But I want thinking back to before all these grand adventures on the water. In doing my research for this conversation, your life took a bit of a dramatic turn in 2015, where you
Yeah.
decided to get sober. What was that? What was that tipping point for you that led to this life altering decision?
Yeah, the tipping point was a conversation with someone else who had gotten sober. I was at
Uh,
a party and I saw my friend Jim and I offered him a beer because he didn't have a beer in his hand. And he said, "No, I quit drinking a year ago." And I had been thinking about it for years because I knew I was drinking too much and I was out of control. And so I asked him, how'd you quit? And why'd you quit? How did you do it? I'm curious. And he said, my brother died. And his brother was younger than me at the time. I was 44 at that time. And his brother died at 40
hmm,
years old, not from one night of overdosing, or it was from a
yeah.
long-term heavy liquor
Wow.
drinking. And he died a very long, slow death of internal organ failure, which is what everybody who drinks liquor's future is. If you're a
Yeah.
heavy liquor drinker, that's what happens in the end. Every organ in your body is slowly failing. It's slowly, it's poisoned. Anyway, that's what triggered it for me. Nothing really dramatic, no rock bottom. But the next day, I had a terrible hangover. I skipped work. I stayed home and like watched Netflix, and I ordered a pizza, and the pizza was terrible. It tasted like Play-Doh. And I remember thinking, this is the lamest day of my life. I've skipped work. I'm watching Netflix, and I'm eating this horrible pizza that I can't even taste. And my buddy Jim quit drinking. That's clearly what I need to do. And I started taking steps right there. I actually still had 2 beers in the fridge from the night before, so I drank them, and I said, tomorrow I'm
Yeah.
gonna quit." And I did. The next day was it. Day 1,
Wow.
that was, February 3rd, 2015, 10 years ago.
Yeah. Now you wrote about your journey to sobriety then, and you did not rely on the club, the AA.
I didn't.
So how did this unconventional approach shape your recovery and even your perspective on addiction?
Well, yeah, I've got nothing but respect for AA. It's just not for me. It's not for everybody.
Hmm.
A lot of
Right.
people don't wanna go to group meetings,
Yeah.
or they have some other reason that AA just doesn't agree with them. There's no one thing in the world that fits everybody, no matter what we're
Yeah.
talking about, whether it's food, clothes, groups, group therapy, whatever. There's different kinds of people. I'm not going
Hmm.
to go to group therapy no matter how successful it is. It's just not going to happen. I might go once
Yeah.
or twice. I have been. I've been to probably maybe 4 AA meetings in my life. Kind of like yoga. I'll go to yoga once in a while too and learn what they've got to teach, and then I'm going to do it at home.
Yeah.
I don't need to go every day. I don't need to go to AA every day. But I kind of developed my own method, and it worked. What can I say? I've been
Hmm.
sober 10 years. I haven't
Wow.
relapsed. Uh, I quit smoking weed too. I was a big time pot smoker. That took another year.
Wow.
It was February 23rd. So it was a year and 20 days more. It was February 23rd, 2016 that I quit smoking weed finally. But I had no desire to quit in the very beginning. When you're in your first month of not
Hmm.
drinking alcohol and you're already a pot smoker, I say
Yeah.
keep smoking pot, smoke all you want, just don't drink, eat cookies, whatever, do whatever. Don't start a new bad habit, but
Yeah.
do
Right.
whatever it takes otherwise to quit drinking. And you can quit. your other bad habits later when you've got control.
Yeah.
You don't want to try to
Yeah.
quit everything. I didn't want to try to quit everything all at
Hmm.
once. I did try to quit smoking 6 months into sobriety, and I failed. Even after a month, I went a whole month without smoking, and I still felt horrible. I couldn't sleep. I was angry. I was
Wow.
depressed. My friends all hated me.
Yeah.
My band members, my band members hated me because I was being an ass. I was.
Yeah.
It's. I didn't realize. I didn't
Yeah.
realize that marijuana is addictive. It's now medically recognized as an addictive drug.
Hmm.
I was addicted. I didn't realize it. It was extremely difficult to quit. It had some serious consequences, but I powered through the next year and got
Yeah.
off it. And I got off by going sailing. I
Wow.
scheduled a trip. I found a guy who needed crew. There's websites, crewbay.com and such. I found a guy who needed crew to do a 3-day trip from St. Lucia to Puerto Rico. I got on that boat. I smoked a joint on the way to the airport in Florida. And that's the last weed I ever smoked right there. That was it, that
Wow.
joint on the car. And I got on the plane and flew there and used that guy's sailboat trip as my first few days
Wow.
of not
Of
smoking weed,
detox.
of
Yeah.
detox.
Yeah. Well,
I didn't tell him.
that's a pretty good, your secret's safe with me. That's a pretty good spot for detox, the open ocean on a boat.
Yeah,
And
I figured those guys probably didn't smoke and I wouldn't be exposed to it. First day in St.
Mhm.
Lucia, somebody offers to sell me weed. There's a guy smoking pot on the dock. There's Rastafarians all over the place. I'm like, oh man, this isn't what I was hoping for.
Yeah, right.
But once
Right.
we got sailing, it was, no exposure.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you too about the musician part of your life. And did that have an impact or maybe a little bit of a hindrance or a help to finding sobriety?
Yeah, I was a guitar player in a reggae band, so
Oh,
there was
well,
there
there
was
you go.
nothing there was no sobriety going on there,
None whatsoever. And
Well, we
was
played
it,
bar gigs,
yeah,
we're getting paid in beer,
of course.
most of the time, and, we all smoked weed, and all my friends smoked weed. I was a surfer, a reggae musician. Like, I was in a beer drinking, pot smoking world, and it seemed very
Yeah.
normal to me.
Yeah.
It's like everybody else does, it
Yeah.
just seemed normal.
Right. And the reason I thought that I would ask that question is every other part of our conversation has just been so detailed and picturesque. I wanted to ask that just to illustrate how dramatic a change it was for you to choose to leave all of this stuff behind.
Mhm.
And then you got into sailing and you got into writing books and was I wanted to ask you about your latest book, Until They Bury Me.
Yeah.
That's a kind of a psychological thriller, right? With some science fiction mixed into it. Do you think that your nomadic lifestyle played into the premise of that book?
The nomadic lifestyle plays into the writing for sure because I live on a boat
Mm,
by myself and it's a
yeah,
very good environment to write in,
yeah,
and particularly when you're at anchor, which is where I spend most of my time.
yeah,
Yeah, that book is mostly influenced by past experiences, relationships, people I've known. It was somewhat cathartic, and I love writing fiction. I also write short stories. Every month, I post a new short story on my Substack page. Fiction is fun. It's just like playing guitar. I wrote music. We were an original band, and I wrote a lot of the music. I love being creative. I used to be an artist too, a
yeah,
painter. I painted pictures as well. I've always been some sort of an artist, but
right,
writing is extremely creative. It,
yeah,
it it takes it to a whole new level. You live deep inside your mind, and you get into the minds of the readers. You create entire
yep,
worlds and characters and circumstances.
absolutely,
I just love it. I really enjoy writing fiction. I enjoy writing nonfiction too. My nonfiction sailing books, are popular,
yeah.
but writing fiction is really, really fun.
Yeah, so I want to ask you a few more things about writing, but let's take a little call to action break. And how can our listeners get in touch with you and actually find some of your books and your podcasts?
You can find everything at paultrammell.com. My last name is Trammell, paultrammell.com. If you look up my name on Amazon, you'll find all my books.
Yeah,
But there's links on my website too. I've got 2 podcasts, and there's pictures there of my boat and
right. And
other
that
few other
Sailing to
things.
Newfoundland book, ladies and gentlemen, is out there.
It is out
And
there.
yeah, now I wanted to ask you too about the gold box. What is that story about?
I spend a lot of time free diving and spearfishing. And
Wow. Okay.
I'm always dreaming about treasure,
Yeah.
because it's out there. It's real. There's gold lying on the bottom of the ocean in various places that hasn't been found yet, for sure. People find it every now and then. I always dream about it.
Yeah.
And as soon as you start thinking that might actually happen,
Yeah.
because I'm free diving all the time, you think like,
Uh-huh.
what would I do? What do you
Yeah.
actually do when you find gold? Can you just sell it right away? Is it even legal? Is it
Yeah.
even legal to keep?
Yeah.
Like you
Is
find gold
Spain
in the
gonna sue
Bahamas.
you?
When you find gold in the Bahamas, it's not really legal. It's not really yours. It belongs to
Yeah.
the Bahamas. And then you've got gold on your boat. Any thief in the area that finds out about that is going to come take it because that's a lot of
Yeah.
money.
Yeah.
So immediately you've got all these questions like, what do you do? Who do you tell?
Right.
Can you tell anybody?
Exactly.
What if you've got friends? What if you're diving with with two other people, for instance? What if you're
Mm-hmm.
diving with a good friend and you find something? Are you going to show it to them? Are you going to stick it in your pocket? There's so many questions that pop up, and as I ran down those, a story
Uh-huh.
developed in my head, and the story is the gold box.
That sounds great. I wanted to ask you about Hunter S. Thompson or some other pivotal writers. Were there some guys or some gals that really hooked you in with their writing, and maybe you kind of think of them maybe as writing mentors or examples?
Yeah, certainly. With sailing nonfiction, it's Bernard Matessier,
Hmm.
who wrote The Long Way.
Yep.
And in fiction, it's Cormac McCarthy, who's known for writing The Road and Blood Meridian. Blood Meridian, in
Hmm.
particular, uh, his writing gets into my head and creates scenes and feelings and people. It's so immersive to me. It's more
Yeah.
immersive than going to a movie theater and watching a movie on a big screen. It's immersive in a deeper way. He's a master. He's
Yes.
like a magician. A
Yep.
good writer is like a magician, and that's what McCarthy is to me.
Yeah.
I really really like to figure out how he does it, how he did it. He
Yeah.
died recently, but yeah,
Well,
he's man.
I love quotes, and so I just quickly typed into the interwebs Cormac McCarthy, and of course, No Country for Old Men. You never know what worse luck your bad luck has saved you from.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a great one.
It's true. It's true. And scars have a strange power to remind us that our past is real.
Yep.
So he had a way with words. I got to read one more here. Nobody wants to be here and nobody wants to leave. That's from The Road.
Mm.
Boy, what have authors given us? We could all just take a moment of silence. We won't, but we could just to think of those authors that have written something so profound and changed the course of our lives. Do you think that there was maybe a book that you've written that you hope someone might read and have a little bit of a transformative experience?
Well, certainly, Alcoholics Not Anonymous and The Joy
Mm,
of Living Clean and Sober are the two books that I'm most proud of. Two things in my life that I'm most proud of, honestly, just to know that thousands of people have read those books,
mhm.
and out of those thousands, some percentage of them have gotten sober because of it.
Yeah,
That just makes me feel like I finally have done something that makes the world a better place. And it's not just,
yeah,
one person gets sober. It's not just one person whose life changes. It's everybody around them. It might be their family, and then it might be their friends. And then they might go on and influence other people to get sober. It's a snowballing effect. Good deeds can be magnified and
yeah,
multiplied and pass
yeah.
on forever
Right.
into the future.
That's
Um,
right. Yeah, I was having that conversation this morning with another guest who's going to be coming out in April on 5am podcast, Dave Richards. And we were just talking about how I'm thinking of too many things all at once, but I know we've got to wrap up here. But he and I were talking about how everyone is like a present or a box that has a bow around and is tied, and it's up to us whether we want to be a great gift to somebody or unwrap what somebody is willing to offer us. So that's when we have those things in life that we get to impact somebody with, there's no feeling quite like that. Just as we are wrapping up, I did want to ask you, how do you think your approach to creativity changed since embracing sobriety?
wow. You know, in the very beginning, a lot of things were difficult.
Hmm.
Um, playing music, I was so used to doing it intoxicated, but I couldn't write. I didn't write. you can't write when you're stoned. There's a few things you cannot do when you're stoned. Math is number one. It goes right out the window. Reading comprehension goes way down, way, way down. And likewise, the ability to write. Some authors were drunks, but I would venture to say not too many of them were writing when they were stoned. I
Yeah.
certainly couldn't. I couldn't write anything. I could barely read. That's, writing didn't even start. I mean, I was dabbled in it, but I never got serious about
Hmm.
it until I got sober.
Wow.
And now my mind works so much better than it did when I was somewhat intoxicated 24 hours a day. It's just incredible going from the bicycle to the car, like you said
Hmm.
earlier. Like
Yeah.
now I've got a very nice automobile in my head that
Yep.
can really go places.
Yeah.
And and now I've learned that we get stoned or drunk, particularly stoned. Let's just use that one. We get
Yeah.
stoned for some of the same reasons that we meditate. Getting high is just a cheap way to experience a small part of what meditation and mindfulness can
Yeah.
bring you. When you've realized that you don't need the drugs, you can find so much more without them.
Yeah.
And when you really learn, when you get better and better at, really learn, I'm certainly no master at any of this, but
Yeah. Right.
as I get better at controlling my mind and learning about it and learning where it can go, I get more and more creative and I get better at all the things that I've wanted to
Yeah.
do throughout my life.
Yeah.
Using drugs to do it is just a cheap shortcut that comes to a dead end in
Right.
comparison.
Yeah. A good friend of mine, Andrew, he used to say, and of course he transformed his life as well. He would say, with the power of God, he did that. But he would always say, Michael, there ain't no high like the Most High. And it's that spiritual. You're looking for that
Yeah.
mindfulness. You're looking for that meditation, and you think it's in a plant, but it's actually something that's already been deposited in us
Yeah, exactly.
in that sense. So one other thing I wanted to ask you about is you've mentioned nurturing creativity. Could you share a specific practice or ritual that helps you stay creatively inspired even while you're soloing on the
Certainly. My morning routine starts with reading a poem.
Hmm.
So when I get up in the morning, one of the first things I do is put on water for coffee. And while that's heating up,
Yeah.
I read a poem. And then
Nice.
when the coffee's ready, I go up on deck and I walk out towards the front half of my boat is flat. It's a flush deck. And I go out there, and this is before sunrise. I go out there with my coffee and I stretch. I go through a stretching routine or yoga/stretching routine. And then when that's finished, I sit down and meditate for 20 minutes. Those two things, starting the day with poetry, not looking at my phone.
Yeah.
I'm not allowed to look at my phone until all this is over. The last thing you want to do is wake up in the morning and right away start scrolling through your phone, looking at social
Hmm.
media or the news,
Yeah.
emails. Like that doesn't put your mind in a good place. So yeah, that's one little thing I do to nurture creativity. Other things are I have a poetry club that meets online every week and a half where I've got to write
Oh,
two
wow.
poems for each meeting.
Nice.
I have to write a short story once a month for my Substack page. Got to do it. And the short stories I want to be good, but I got to put something out once a week. The poems I would like to be good as well, but I tell everybody in my club, it doesn't matter if your poems are bad, as long as you try, as long as you write them. You got to have the courage to put it out there, and
Yeah.
you got to lower your standards if you're not writing anything. Sometimes people's standards are too high. Usually our standards
Hmm.
are too high, and it makes us not want to even try.
Yeah.
So write a
Yeah,
bad poem, it's fine.
absolutely. That's right. So can you tell us in your mind what's coming up, what's on the horizon for you?
Well, right now I've got lots of work in progress. I'm finishing up and publishing two books that I'm co-writing with Tapio Lehtinen. He's a sailor. He's an
Okay.
around the world racer. So very soon we're going to have The Last Voyage of Hysteria published. That's a book
Okay.
during which his boat sank right out from under him while he was
Oh,
sailing around the world. And I'm also writing a screenplay for Until They Bury Me. I
wow.
have a connection in Hollywood that hopefully is going to make that into a film.
That's cool.
I've got another book It's a nautical fiction. It's a thriller that takes place on a sailboat called Identity Crisis. Well, the working title is Identity Crisis. It's almost finished, but it's gotten put on the back burner because of these other projects that are going on. And then there's a second book with Tapio as well. So there's 4 writing projects that I want to complete this year. And until that's complete, I'm not gonna move anywhere else. I'll sail within Panama.
Yeah.
But I'm just in a place where I love being. I get work done here. There's very good surf. There's free diving and spearfishing. There's various islands to visit, language to learn, cultures to explore.
That's exciting. It's exciting. Well,
And it's
before we
never
wrap
cold.
up,
It's
and
never
never
cold here.
which is great, which is really good. I know we're up here, we're getting ready for spring, and we're like, come on, spring. So,
Yeah, bring it
today's
on,
the first
right?
day of spring, I think. Yeah, we're ready. But before we wrap up, I'd like to remind our listeners that Paul, well, he's got a great website, and I'm sure you could find some free resources, if nothing else, some great podcasts to help you on your own journey. You can access those valuable tools at paultrammell.com/ I've got dream chasers and eccentrics. Don't forget the hyphens. I'll put it on the screen. You'll see it. And head over there. There's some great conversations. I was rooting around there today listening to a couple of different conversations, and it's just nice to get into this peaceful spot where you can just listen and as I like to say, sitting at that diner table and just bringing people in. And Paul, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your insights and stories.
Sure. Thank you for having me on your show. It's an honor to be here.
Yeah, it was great. I think I'm going to say I got more out of it than you did maybe, but I just loved having this conversation with you, Paul. And so nice to talk about your journey and your sailing. So sincere thanks for being here at Van Podcast.
You bet. It's my pleasure.
Yeah. Now, I want to thank our viewers too. We appreciate you joining in on this conversation. I've already mentioned the whole diner thing. I get it. I like it. We're eavesdropping. It's a great thing. So if you haven't already, please share this with your friends and your neighbors, maybe a few frenemies. They might move the needle over to friendship because we all need more friends, right? So share this with the people that you like or don't like. They're all going to like it. It's going to be a great conversation. Even those people who might be dealing with that need to, they don't want to go to a meeting, but that's okay. Maybe there's another way for them. And Paul certainly has described his experience in finding sobriety. Of course, I'm going to ask you to give us a 5-star review on your favorite podcast player. And I do want to give a special thanks to those that ventured over to buymeacoffee.com/5am podcast. We appreciate your participation in what we are working towards here at 5am podcast. Once again, thank you all so much for being here and supporting us. Even just by listening, we love it. And we are so thankful that we can share stories like Paul's with you. So until next time, make sure to seize your day and enjoy those sunrises and sunsets, everyone. I'm Michael Klassen.